Good morning. We're continuing our series on the Sermon on the Mount. Today's passage is Matthew chapter 5, 27 to 30. So if you have your Bible, let's get that ready. Let's get those notes ready. I will start off with a little bit of fun here. I want to ask you, how well do you know your love song? So I'm going to put up a lyric up here, and then you can guess, okay? So let's go through it. I will read it to you. You need me like I need you. If you know it, you can shout it out. It's like a video. It's like a game show. We can share our dreams coming true. I can show you what true love means. Just take my hand, baby, please. Nobody knows this song. I see some people that know this band. They're a band. I'll give you a hint. Come on. They're doing residency in Las Vegas. They're there. Backstreet Boys, right? Backstreet Boys. It's true. Some phony fans out there don't know this one, okay? I don't know the song. I wasn't a BSB fan growing up. Next. Okay, let's see. I knew you in another life. You had that same look in your eyes. I love you. Don't act so surprised. Okay, these are not so great lyrics. Who's that? No? Billie Eilish? Come on. You guys love this. I mean, it's on my Spotify because my girls listen to it. All right, next song. This is a great one. You're my end and my beginning. Even when I lose, I'm winning.
Rhythm and blues?
Not rhythm and blues. John Legend. John Legend, you're right. John Legend. I don't really know his music too well. Okay, next one. Like a river flows, surely to the sea, darling, so it goes. Some things you know are meant to be. Elvis, very good. The oldest artist I picked, my mom's favorite artist of all time, Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll. Okay, last one. I need a man who'll take a chance on a love that burns hot enough to last. Whitney Houston, you guys are awesome. All the oldest artists, all the new artists got vanquished. No one knows them, but look. The old classic love songs are here to stay, okay? And I put those out I thought the older folks, but the younger folks, they know these love songs as well. Okay, today we're going to talk about love, but I want to ask this question. Were those love songs or lust songs? Because I think most love songs are actually lust songs. And today what I'm going to talk about is the way of love versus the way of lust. Because in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus talks about two paths. We've been talking about that, right? There's a wide gate and a broad road that leads to destruction chosen by a lot of people. And there's a narrow gate and a difficult path that leads to life found by few. And so we're going to talk about two paths today. Lust versus love. Now, when it comes to sermons on sex, here's how most people would approach it. And I've certainly done it to a certain extent. It's tempting to give a cultural analysis and then conclude with biblical rules. Right? Cultural analysis, the world is bad. Biblical rules. Here's how you're going to live a good life. So I could tell you about the sexualization of the entertainment industry. I could talk about the abuse of the internet, which is now the platform for pornographic empires that are making billions of dollars. Or I could talk about the insanity of our children's sexual education classes. And all these warrant discussion, these warrant action. But I want to propose something today, that any hope that we have in this battle really lies in the heart. That's exactly what Jesus tells us in our passage this morning. So if you have your Bible, let's read it together. Matthew chapter 5, 27 to 30. You have heard it said, you shall not commit adultery. Verse 28, but I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than your whole body go into hell. Now, this is a very serious passage. There's a lot packed in here, but let's unpack it today. What Jesus is really saying, however, the bottom line is this. The battle is not won through rules and regulation. Jesus says actually the battle is actually in here. It's in your heart. It's not out there. It is out there, certainly, but it starts in here. So you have to examine what's going on in here. And that's my premise today. Now, this passage is misunderstood in two ways, and I want to explain it, and then we'll land the plane, okay? So the first way this passage is often misunderstood is it can be easily dismissed. Now, I want to start off with that because, look, this passage screams against everything we see and experience in society today. Most movies, most songs, celebrities, influencers, and even your colleagues tell you to go against what is said here. So your brain is already conditioned to think this passage is impractical or even offensive. We are immersed in a culture that would say this passage is actually utter nonsense. It's utter nonsense. I want to ask this question. How do we get here? This is important because I want us to understand how deeply immersed we are. And a lot of folks here might raise your hand and say, well, it's a sexual revolution. Sexual revolution. This was when widespread changes happened in our attitudes toward premarital sex and homosexuality and abortion. And most people would think, if you study history long enough, you'll say, yeah, it was around the 1960s, 1970s, that's when it happened. Now, in large part, it was popularized by the work of Sigmund Freud, the psychoanalyst who argued that who we are at the most basic, the most fundamental level is our sexual desires. He argued that, and he popularized that. Now, what we often fail to realize is that the sexual revolution was a symptom of deeper societal changes, particularly those associated with what it means to be a fulfilled human person. So I read a book recently called Strange New World by Dr. Carl Trueman. This is what he said. The sexual revolution rests on the idea, now listen to his words, that fulfillment is a matter of personal psychological happiness, and anything that obstructs that, specifically traditional sexual codes, is by definition oppressive and preventing us from flourishing. Now, what is he saying there? He's saying, you and I have this desire to be happy, and we need to express that identity. And anything that stops that actually ruins my identity. It ruins my freedom. It restricts my freedom. See, the sexual revolution is not really about sexual behavior, how we act. It's really about identity, who we are. So when people hear a verse like this, they aren't really offended by what it's telling them not to do, but rather who to be. You have to understand this is what's happening in society. The sexual revolution is simply one manifestation of something broader that is happening in our society. And some would term this expressive individualism. Expressive individualism. This is the idea that to be fulfilled, to be the authentic me, to be a genuine person, I need to be able to express outwardly who I feel inside. I need to publicly perform who I feel inside. Now, that's important that you understand that. This is why in this society today, this verse is really hard to accept. In our culture today, sexual identity and thus expression is negotiated rather than given. I negotiate for it, right? I dictate who I am. See, if you examine the Bible or ancient Greece, you'll find that it has a lot to do about sex, but it's always presented as an activity, an action. That activity is sometimes deemed legitimate or illegitimate, but it remains an activity, not an identity. But in our culture today, however, sex has become exactly that. It has become an identity rather than a mere activity. Now, if you study this is actually quite fascinating, but it's actually quite alarming because Carl Trueman further expands his idea in this book, and he says, if this happens, if sex becomes an identity, which it has been in our society, it actually leads to one thing else, and it's this, that sex also becomes political. political. What he means by that is sex will inevitably become political because the laws governing sex are less about rules and behaviors and more about who you are allowed to be. So it's not just don't do this, don't do that, but it's if I tell you this passage is fundamental to your way of life, it's a restriction to your freedom, who you can be. So it's a lot harder to break this down for a lot of people. A lot of people say this verse here is archaic, it is unrealistic, and it's oppressive. It's oppressive. If sex is my fundamental identity, and if I'm permitted or even encouraged to express this identity as I choose, while everything around me supports this expression, then if you look at a passage like this, you'll just blatantly ignore it. It's absurd. So in one sense, this passage can be easily dismissed. And if you read this, you'll think it's crazy, right? Most people would read this passage and say, there's no way that Jesus is telling us what he's telling us here, right? I thought he was a good, realistic, moral teacher. And he says stuff like this. It's crazy, right? So that's on one end of the spectrum. On the other hand of the spectrum, I need to say this. It does produce, I would say especially if you're a Christian for a long time, a needless shame and guilt. See, some people have misinterpreted this passage to conclude that every sexual thought is a sinful thought. Now, I want to be careful here, but let me explain what I mean by this. And I hope that we can unlock this passage. The key to understanding this passage is to understand that Jesus is not denying sexual desire, but giving us a sexual ethic. Right? Some people would look at this and conclude that sex is dirty. If I have a thought about sex, I am dirty. And it comes with a lot of shame and guilt. What's shame and what's guilt? Shame is really a state. It's a feeling that I am not who God wants me to be. And guilt is an action. I did something bad, right? I am bad. I did something bad. And sometimes we can load up with this and it burdens us. And that point of this passage is not that we have unhelpful forms of shame and guilt heaped upon us. Jesus actually tells us this to release us, to give us freedom in our lives. See, Jesus isn't condemning sexual desire, but rather its misuse. It's important to find out specifically what Jesus is saying here. So we need to delve into the original language. And here's how the NIV reads, right? I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman, or a person, I guess, lustfully, has already committed adultery with him or her in his heart. Now, you read that and you can conclude a bunch of things in the English, right? But there's a couple issues I want to unpack here, right? The first is there's a missing preposition. The English translations purposefully take this out to make the sentence flow better. Now, this is a reality in translation. You have to understand when you have a Greek Bible and a Hebrew Bible, you have scholars that will translate those original languages to English. And not every word translates perfectly. There's a lot of nuance and connotation. That's why there's a lot of different translations. It's literally, some things are lost in translation. But there's a missing preposition here, and the preposition is pros, which means in order to, which conveys what? Intention. So you might translate it this way. I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman in order to lust, that might be the more literal translation, after her has already committed adultery. So in order to, there's an intention, okay? Number two, it's important to note that the present tense participle, which if you look at the word looks, that is actually, there's an idea that there's a continuation of that, which refers to something that you continue to look, rather than you just casting a passing glance, okay? So in other words, what Jesus is saying, there's an intention, and it's prolonged, and it's focused, okay? There's an intensity to that. And finally, the word for lust, we need to look at this word, epithumio, which indicates action, not just a feeling or passing thought. So what Jesus is really trying to say here is lust is a purposeful, prolonged action. It's a focused desire for something you want. The word for lust here is the same word that Paul uses in Romans chapter 13, verse 9, and he actually repeats it in Romans chapter 7, verse 7, which can be translated, actually, covet. Covet. So I would say the most literal translation is this. I tell you that anyone who continually, okay, I'm adding that word in, looks at a woman in order to, what? Covet after her, has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Okay, that's the most literal translation. Now, why am I saying that? Well, let's look at the word covet for a sec, because where else is this word used? You're saying, I've never really heard of this word, right? It's kind of seems like an old word. Well, the reason why it's an old word is it's found all the way back in Genesis. Genesis, but Exodus, really, Exodus. It's found in the 10th commandment, right? The 10th commandment says this: you shall not covet your neighbor's house, or his wife, or his male or female servant, or his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. Now, I want to link this for you. The 10th commandment is unique because it's truly the only commandment that deals with the heart, interior motivations and desires. Like, you have to remember the context here. Jesus is speaking to Jews obsessed with obeying the Torah. The Torah is 613 rules, and they're all about external behaviors, right? And so what Jesus is really saying here is this: looking or even noticing or even admiring is really not the issue. The issue resides not with the eyes per se, but really in the heart. The issue is the intention to covet. Covet. Now you say, what is coveting? If I were to define it, it's really this. Coveting is to feel an excessive or inordinate desire for something. So desire is okay, but it's inordinate. And I'll explain that a little bit later. But it's excessive. To want something centrally, to invest your hopes and your dreams into something or into someone. That's why the late Tim Keller used to say that the 10th commandment expresses one of the most important principles of believing and practicing the Christian faith. And the reason he says that is because he says, look, the final commandment is final because all the other commandments, 1 to 9, hinge on the 10th one, right? You wouldn't break the others unless you break this one. So you wouldn't steal or murder or commit adultery if you don't covet, in other words. Do you know what Jesus is doing here? He's really trying to get at the root of the issue. See, looking lustfully and even committing adultery are symptoms of a deeper issue. Coveting. Coveting is the issue. If you have a problem with your organs and you go to a doctor and they treat your skin, right? They rub all sorts of oil and massage your skin and they say, okay, you're all good, right? But you go home, you're going to still feel pain inside. What you need is a surgical intervention. But here's the problem. The surgical intervention hurts a lot more. Nobody wants to go through surgery. Nobody wants to be under the knife. But you have to get at the root of the issue to solve the issue. See, coveting has many expressions or forms. And in most sermons, they talk about this. I've heard sermons about this, right? Here's some forms. Sex before marriage, sex outside of marriage, right? And that's really rooted in this belief that sex is absolutely necessary for me to be happy and for me to be whole, right? That's something society has taught us over and over again. Every movie, every song tells you this. Every TV show you watch tells you this. That's one form or expression. Another form or expression is pornography. Porn sites receive more monthly traffic than Netflix, Amazon, or X combined. 35% of internet downloads are porn-related. And you can feel there, if I say these things, there could be things that you're thinking about in your own life. Another expression is this: fantasizing about the perfect relationship. That's usually not talked about. But I read this article by a woman who said this, "For most women, the lust battle is birthed in the emotions. I'm afraid for far too long, many women leave sexual sin undealt with because they believe the lie that lust is simply only a man's struggle." And I do feel that. I do feel that in most circles, when it comes to sermons like this, we're just talking to the men. Oh, you guys get better in shape, fix your problems. And the women sometimes feel like, well, I might have issues too. This woman confirms it in her article. See, we do all these things. Why? Because we covet. Because we feel that we'll never be whole or complete or happy without them. And when it gets to this point, it becomes so dangerous. And we've seen the terrible result of letting sexual sin fester and grow and ruin lives. And that's why Jesus says, you've got to take it seriously. Take care of the root issue. Now, notice what he says in verse 29 to 30. He says, and this, by the way, this verse has been misused, sadly and unfortunately, throughout the centuries. But if your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out. If your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off. Because it's better than that than to be thrown into hell. And most people, you're saying, how do I even figure this? I don't understand this verse. Is it literal? Some people have taken it literally, right? Now, this is hyperbolic language. I don't believe Jesus is literally advocating for amputation, self-mutilation. But what he's saying is the danger is totally real. There is an urgency here. See, the problem with life is a lot of times you know what you're supposed to do, but there's no urgency. So you say, I'll deal with it later. I'm sure things will work themselves out. We don't deal with it. And Jesus says, look, you better deal with it. It's better to lose a part of your body than your whole body. Now, the word hell here is really this term that refers to a place outside of Jerusalem where garbage was burned. It's an actual literal place. Then there's worms, there's maggots, there's fire. It's disgusting. So when Jesus speaks about hell, what he's really referring to, and for that audience there that was listening to him say these for the first time on the Sermon on the Mount, he's not really warning about hell in the next life. See, a lot of times we conclude from this passage that if I have sexual thoughts or sin, I go to hell. Right? I do something bad, I go to hell. A lot of people think that's what Christianity is. So I got to avoid doing bad things, I got to do good things, right? I better have pure thoughts. But Jesus is saying, not really that. He's actually saying, and he's warning us about a hellish existence in this life. In this life. Now, let me explain that. Think about it. We were created to receive and to give love. And those are the two most important experiences a human being desires to have and wants to have and needs to have. We long for these two experiences, to receive love and then to give it back. Okay, life really comes down to that. Now, the Bible has a word for this. The word in the Bible is communion. Communion. We're going to participate in Holy Communion later, right? We were created to have communion first with God above and then with each other. Jesus said, if you're going to remember anything, love God and love others. Those are the two most important things you ought to do with your life. We're supposed to give and receive love freely and generously and sacrificially. When you go down the path of coveting, what happens is you lose that communion with God and you lose that communion with others and you break and you twist relationships for your own consumption. That's what coveting really means. See, the world has taught us the way of lust. And I said it before, but we are all immersed in this world, whether you think so or not. We are lustful people. We covet, we consume, and we commodify relationships that exploits and objectifies the other person. And Jesus says, if you walk down that path, it will cost you your life and it will cost you your soul. And what Jesus is saying here is, it's dangerous, it's bad, it's not what I want. I want you to walk the way of love. To love another person with kindness and with purity. And Jesus says, look, the only way you're going to do that is you have to deal with the root of the issue. The root of the issue is coveting. Coveting. Let's talk about it. Let's get that surgical knife out. And even though it will hurt, let's talk about it. Because what I'm saying here today does hurt for some of you. It's a real serious issue. We've all sinned in every single way possible. We've all sinned sexually. We've all sinned in our thoughts and our behaviors and in our emotions. You may say, okay, but how? How am I supposed to do that? Now, I'm going to say something to you that it sounds obvious, but it's actually very beautiful, but it's not exactly easy to accept or to think about, which is to let God love you. Let God love you. Now, if you grow up in church, we all know I have to love God, right? Love the Lord your God with everything you are. Soul, strength, mind, heart, spirit, whatever. But actually, the chief journey, the chief goal of the Christian life is actually to allow God's love to penetrate your being, to let God love you. That's actually how you love God. You let God love you first, then you respond in love. You receive love, then you give love. Yes? The problem with coveting, think about it, is this. There's no way you can summon enough power and courage to change your desires. See, I can give you a long list of do's and do nots, right? Which is helpful, but it does not address the root issue. That's what we usually do in churches. We say, cultural issue, behavior modification. So there's a problem with the world. There's a problem with me. I'll change my behavior. We're forgetting in the middle is the root cause that we're not dealing with. So here's what I would say. A standard does not change the heart. A story does. A standard, a set of values, laws, regulations. I could go on and on. I could give 613 rules about this. It can judge you, but it won't transform you. It will judge you. You'll feel a certain way when you hear about it. And if you look at Matthew chapter 5, the passage today, it's a standard, yeah? It's a really, really high standard. And you will feel judged under that standard. You feel judged already. You're saying, oh boy, what did I look at this morning or last night? And Jesus is not saying that's where I want to leave you. He says, no, I want to immerse you in my story. See, here's what I would say. Let God's love story shape your desires and intentions and thoughts. What's God's love story? You've known God's love story since you were a child. For those who, especially those who grew up in a church, John 3:16 is God's love story. For God so loved the world, so immensely loved the world, that he desired the world, that he sent his one and only begotten Son. That he did not have to send, but he sent because he so desired you. The gospel of Jesus Christ is the love story you've been looking for. Look, let me say it this way. The love story is not found on the internet. It is not found in pornography. It is not found in celebrity culture. It is not found in K-dramas. Okay? I know everybody loves those dramas on Netflix. But think about what you're watching, right? These are small love stories compared to the love story of God. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't look for love in other people. Romantic love is a great thing in the context of marriage, for instance. But let me say it this way. You have to get the order right. The order of your love right. The sexual ethic here is not based on repression, but reordering. Reordering. See, St. Augustine defined coveting as a desire that is out of order. Inordinate, right? Out of order. I'll give you a silly example. You guys know I love The Rock, right? The celebrity The Rock. Yeah. I saw him last night, actually. Serious. Now, I was 1,000 feet away from him, but we breathe the same air. You know, guys, I love The Rock, right? No, I also love my children. And I love God. Now, what do those three things have in common? They're all lovely things, okay? But you got to get the order right. St. Augustine would say, if you love less important things more than more important things, that is an out of order, inordinate love. A reordering must happen here at the root place, the heart. Now, that will not happen if you simply follow a law or a standard. You have to be immersed in a story. When your heart grasps the ultimate story of the gospel, it naturally will reorder its loves. Now, that takes time and effort. I'm not saying you could just read it once, understand it once, and there you go. But it takes a lifetime. It takes effort. It takes commitment to understand the story and to be immersed in the story. See, coveting can occur in any relationship if love is out of order. If you look to your partner to fulfill your needs that only God can do for you, you'll crush them under the weight of those expectations. Ernest Becker once said, "No person can bear the burden of godhood." Ernest Becker was an atheist philosopher. And he said, no person, no man, no woman can bear that burden. If the love of Jesus is not the main thing that gives you acceptance and gives you companionship and gives you security, you're going to make your relationship with another person an idolatrous thing. In other words, I will make my partner something that only Christ can be for me. And let me say that when that happens, you crush them and you crush yourself. Because you will do anything in your power to get it, right? And to keep it. And if you lose it, you'll crush yourself. You will wither away and die because that was your hope and dream into that person. And that's why in marriage course, I always tell people this, that don't put your completeness into the other person. They compliment you, they love you, but first, you love God first and let God love you. See, single or married, you must know that Jesus' love is the key to healthy relationships. When Jesus becomes my primary source of love and acceptance, I release, now listen to my words, I release the other person from this impossible standard. And I can love them as they were meant to be loved. I can be released from coveting. I can be satisfied with his love and acceptance. And that love and acceptance fuels every other relationship I have. I will love the other person, any other human being better because I love God first. The one thing the law cannot do is forgive you. Only a person can do that. The heart of the Christian story is that Jesus came as a spiritual healer. Some of your hearts need healing today. He did not come as a moral policeman. Okay, a lot of people think he came as that verse sounds like a moral policeman type of verse, right? Jesus said, no, I'm here to heal you from the inside out, to perform surgery on you. And even though it'll hurt, if you come to me with any shame or guilt that you have in regards to this issue, I will forgive you. I will help you change for the better. That's the hope of the gospel. See, if I were just giving you a list of things, it really wouldn't matter, would it? So let me ask you this question. Are you walking in the way of lust or in the way of love? And by the way, the most important truths are the hardest to hear and to apply. The most important things you'll ever need to hear are often the hardest to hear. And let me also say this. As Christians, you and I need to choose daily that narrow path. It's not going to be easy. By the way, it's not going to be easy. No one said it'll be easy. But it's the right thing to do, and it's going to make you the best person that Jesus wants you to be. Now, I'm going to give you a list as I typically do, but it'll kind of break down, are you walking one way or the other? Okay? So on the left-hand side is the broad path. On the right-hand side is the narrow one. Okay? Let's just go through it quickly. The first thing that you'll notice is there's a difference in questions that you ask. On the left-hand side, you often ask this question, what can you do for me? On the right-hand side is, what can I do for you? Now, the world has trained you to ask that first question, which is a question of satisfaction. On the right-hand side, it's a question of service, a question of sacrifice, a question of support, a question of even suffering for the other person. Next, we have this. Lust demands others adjust to my needs. You got to adjust to me, yeah? So I'm number one. Love says, no, I commit myself to adjusting for our relationship. Lust says, or lust can't wait to get. Love can't wait to give. So you're always trying to get things from people? Whatever it is, or do you want to give freely to others? Lust says the body matters most. Love says the person matters most. Lust separates the body from the person, right? It's just the body. Lastly, lust is about finding the right person, and love is becoming the right person. What happens on the left-hand side? I fall in love, right? I find the right person, I fall in love with them, and I fix my hopes and dreams onto this person for my future contentment. And if that doesn't happen, I repeat the process. So I find another person. And on the right-hand side is becoming the right person. My goal is not just to find the right person, it's to become the right person and let God find me the best partner possible. I become the right person. I walk in love. I don't just fall in love. I walk in love. And I fix my hopes and dreams onto God for my contentment and my satisfaction. And if that doesn't happen immediately, I repeat the process. And I say, I will continue to become the right person. See, let God love you. That's how you're going to walk on the right-hand side. It starts with God's love, because the left-hand side is about coveting. The right-hand side is about contentment. His love will give you the courage and conviction to walk on the narrow path. His love will tell us that your worst moments don't define you and that every day brings new opportunities. His love will reorder your heart so that you can live the life he wants you to live. I'd like to sit with you for a sec. We're going to have communion. Pastor Kelly will lead it, but I want to take a moment just to pray. So maybe you would bow your head with me for a second. Again, let this sit with you. We don't have a lot of time during the week to just absorb God's word and to listen to what he's saying to us. And I pray that if anybody here is convicted by this, I know it's a sensitive issue. I know it's a tough issue. I know it's an issue that has probably broken a lot of people here. Society has certainly done that. They haven't helped you become a whole and healthy person that God wants you to be. Society is just about lusting after things and lusting after people, and the chips fall where they may fall, but often they're about your broken life. Society doesn't care. God cares. So let me pray. Lord, our prayer is that we would let you love us, Lord. Would you let that sink in for a sec? Would you say, Lord, I don't know where to find love, but if you love me, I want that love. Lord, I pray that we would let that love transform us from the inside out. When it comes to this issue, Lord, of lust, I know some of us come here with a lot of shame, a lot of guilt. And Lord, I know that a lot of people here may feel hopeless and crushed in this battle. But we also know, Lord, that you can heal us. Because, Lord, you're not just a policeman or some kind of judge, but rather a great doctor, a great physician, a great healer who can cut into the core of the issue and fix us from the inside out. And it will be painful, Lord, but it will be good for us. Lord, help us to walk in the way of love, which is not easy, Lord, but you have demonstrated that it is possible. And you empower us by your Spirit to live that kind of life, to give and to sacrifice and even suffer for the sake of the other person. Lord, life is not about us. It's about you. It's about who you want us to become, Lord. And I know that you say these words so we could be the best version of ourselves under your lordship. So I pray for that to happen in every person's life here. I pray that they would have a friend or someone they could talk to if this is the issue in their life, that at least we could pray for them. Lord, may we deal with this issue today and not wait any longer. In your Son's precious name we do pray. Amen.